Hi everyone, my name is Ravenna Hennane. I am Director of Strategic Partnerships for Global Mentorship Initiative, which connects graduating college students from underserved communities to careers in 50 countries, including 8 refugee camps. And today I'm really happy to co-facilitate this interactive design workshop with the help of Lana Cook from MIT, one of the brilliant leaders coordinating this summit. I'm going to share my screen in just a second. We're going to get right into the materials. Essentially, we're going to have 5 different activities. So a couple different collective reflective questions and then a breakout activity as well. So I'm going to share my screen and ask our first group reflection question. As different people are participating and answering the question, if you agree, feel free to add that in the chat, say, I second that, and that way I can try to kind of track what sort of ideas are resonating the most with people. So today's session is called Designing Systems of Support. Let me up. I want to try to share my screen, but it doesn't seem to want to let me do it right now. Give me 1 second. All right, I think we're good. Can everyone see my screen here with expectations written on it? Fantastic. Okay, so for this first question, today's session is called Designing Systems of Support, Collaboratively Improving the Design of Mentorship and Advising Programs that Support Refugee and Displaced Learner Communities. I wanted to start by just checking in with everyone and asking, what are you hoping to leave this session with? Please feel free to introduce yourself briefly in terms of what the hat is that you're wearing and how it connects with your expectations. We're going to try to keep this first discussion to just 15 minutes and then move into the additional activities. So what are you hoping to get out of this session and our time together today?
I'll go first. I was energized by this session before. Thanks, John, for all your insights. And I really want to understand how we can improve our program. How can we do what we're doing better to have a better impact, even if not necessarily to scale because our mentoring program is limited by our other programs. But how can we really improve and do the best that we can for as many as we can, but not necessarily with the ultimate aim to scale, but to maximize impact. Yes.
Okay. I'm going to do that as 2 separate ones then. Okay.
Yeah, I think I can add to Lorraine. Hi, everyone. My name is Sana, and I work for Talent Beyond Boundaries as capacity building lead and Jordan director. But I think maximizing impact, for me, and it was mentioned in the last session about complementarity. I think we're all working on we're specializing in different things. And if we could just kind of build out that pipeline, maybe build out a visual, and that can help us to really refer and support and really get this whole pipeline to success, because some people are helping, like Named works with having refugees, connecting them to remote work, and Talent Beyond Boundaries then takes a refugee who has that experience and can maybe put them in a job where they have a path to permanence. And so I would love to kind of think about that and kind of have the pipeline sort of drawn out.
Okay, great. So also kind of mapping the other actors and how we can work together.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Great.
If there's an opportunity, I'd love to hear just a little bit more about the remote work opportunities, options for refugees as well, because that seems to be an area that offers some short-term promise.
Great.
Should I jump in really quickly or after?
For right now, let's just kind of focus on we're going to make sure that we get to all of these, maybe not right now in these 10 minutes that we have left, but we'll go into that a little bit more when we're kind of focusing on the specific kind of ideas of crafting the program and how we can work together, if that's okay. That looks really good to me, this idea of how can we scale, how can we, who are the current actors in this space, how can we collaborate, crafting this pipeline, as was said by Sana. Does anyone have anything else that they would like to contribute? Ula?
Yeah, hi everyone. So I come in with a different perspective. It's for adults, for academics, for professors who've been also in exile. This is my own example, and I was always advocating for mentoring programs for academics, and so I'm curious to see the similarities or the differences, and I think everyone is deserves to have some mentoring support, but maybe these are different for young people from more let's say mature. Thank you.
Kind of like
Absolutely.
expanding access. I think that would be wonderful.
Expanding access, so other kind of fields, not just learners, but also professionals, and kind of how we can support different populations. Is that okay? So
maybe also we can stay in academia, not to broaden this too much. Let's say learners and former professors.
okay. Support so through mentorship specifically, Wula?
Yeah, because I believe mentorship will be something very valuable, because I know about other support mechanisms, but they are very limited because they are costly. So I think mentoring is a way to help people to manage to explore their pathways in the new country where they move.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. Kirky, I saw that you had your hand up.
So for us, it's how do we sustain the engagement beyond the program boundaries or the deadlines? One of the things we've been thinking a lot about is how do you activate and engage alumni and keep them involved?
Okay. Whoa, Babel. Okay, great. All right, and I saw Sonia as well.
Yes, for me, I think it's more about how to better focus on the needs of the communities that our programs target, as well as how to improve or ease the access to our programs, so that we can offer like a bigger inclusion of the people that participate.
Great. So how to increase access. Great, so that seems we're starting to get some kind of similar things here. And Lana, great. Yeah, thank you. Feel free to move around my post-it notes. Jadot?
Yeah, my point is around the mentorship program itself. How can we design a mentorship program that has the components which the community needs? It means, just to make it clear, is what are the components of the mentorship program which is going to make the impact into the refugees, but also keeping in mind the context is different. Another point is how can we have the program which finds refugees there where they are, not refugees finding the program. Well, I don't know how I would phrase this, but how can we design a program to find refugees where they are, not refugees come and find ours?
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, but so here, this is really fantastic. I'm just trying to, so I'm hearing kind of some expectations in terms of what we want to touch on together in our time together, but then also kind of what are some of the specific questions that we want to flesh out as we're doing kind of our small group work. And I think, so I'm going to work on trying to organize this a little bit to make sure that we touch on all of those points, but I just want to double check before we go to the first specific activity. Does anyone have any other expectations for our time together today? I see Narges, you had your hand up as well.
Yes, I was thinking of like a way on how to motivate the students and to strengthen their will or their expectation toward these mentorship programs. Because sometimes you find that a student join the program, just learn the skills, and then maybe he doesn't apply them, or he doesn't believe that these skills will benefit him. So I feel sometimes we need to work on something more about the refugee has passed through so difficult situations. They maybe most of them didn't go to school for many years, so their passion toward education maybe just get lower. So how can we improve this? And I'm just asking this question because I believe that because of this time they spent out of the school and within difficult situations, they just lost hope. So how can we just rework on this?
Yeah, absolutely. So how are we going to, but it kind of goes back to this question of how can we activate, or how can we engage the students, but specifically focusing on meeting their specific needs in order to make sure that they are not losing hope, are feeling supported. Is that kind of what you're saying, Narjis?
It's how to regain their trust and their hope that education will benefit them in the future and will provide them and the skills they will learn will provide them opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be a fantastic segue to the next topic, but I think so just let's see, maybe like 2 more minutes. I see that Kirky and Emmanuel both have their hands up. Can we just stop with your 2 responses? Kirky, do you want to go first? Nothing?
No, that was left over from last time. Sorry.
Okay, it was that's the Zoom confusion in terms of putting down a manual hand or not. Emmanuel, did you have something you wanted to share?
Yeah. Actually, I thought I wanted to share. It's quite similar to what Jado has mentioned about how to contextualize the delivery model by involving on-the-ground partners and stakeholders, especially the refugee-led organizations, who understand the context in which the students are in. And those who are interested to scale their program, how can you use or leverage these refugee organizations to maximize the impact, the access, and also increase the number of students in your individual programs?
Okay, fantastic. I'm hearing a lot of definitely nuances between kind of what folks are looking at specifically, but a lot of common themes around how can we work better, more hand in hand with the refugee learners in the program or who have completed the program. How can we make sure that the program is specifically, how can we take a better inventory of what the specific needs are, and how can we work with actors, either international or national, and then community actors. But that sounds, and I'll work on organizing these expectations a little bit more before we get to the end of the session. Can we move to the next question? Is that okay for everyone?
I think I still have one thing to share. I'm not sure if this is the right question to answer it, but we can move it. Just like when we think of connecting the students with job opportunities, we give them the skills and we ask them just to go and find the job. One thing they may face when they apply for a job, they don't have the experience. So we may start thinking of a way to give them this experience through internships. So I think we need to think how we can connect them with people who provide them trainings to gain this experience that enrich their CVs and qualify them to apply for jobs.
Internships, for example. Okay, so that's fantastic. That's definitely something we're going to be getting into as we go into the next parts of this session. Lana, do you want to lead the? Do you want to start off the next question?
Yeah, absolutely. So now that we've set the expectations for the session, let's really get into the work. So we'd like to start by asking you all to identify some of the characteristics of refugee or displaced learners, really recognizing this is not a homogeneous community by any means, but the more that we can really map out here kind of who our users are, who are the people who are benefiting from and are working within these mentor programs, I think the better that we can then go to the design of such programs. So this will be an open participation, similar to the last question. We'll stick to 15 minutes again. So let's spend some time mapping out those characteristics of refugee and displaced learners. Anybody want to begin?
The first word that comes to mind for me is like resilient and innovative. Those are probably the two words, right? Refugees tend to be very resilient and very innovative because they have to find, solutions to all of the different complex problems they have due to their displacement.
Yes, absolutely. We had a great session this morning with University of Geneva InZone on community resilience, and a program that they designed really anchored in stories of resilience. So echo that one.
Absolutely. And so it's fantastic to talk about, these adjectives, but the idea also is that it's not going to be homogeneous, as Lana said, but what are kind of some of the factors that, because this is kind of getting us into the headspace so that we can then go into discussing what does it take, what are the components that we need to think about when we are building a program to support learners. So just thinking about things in terms of what kind of schedules are we talking about, what kind of family structures, and this is going to be very diverse, but just so that we can kind of start thinking about these profiles. Yeah. Lorraine?
I think Manuel and Ola had their hands up first.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'll go the order.
So is it me or?
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So for me, if they are not homogeneous, as you were saying, some need language support and the others can manage on their own. So this is also very key to know. This is a basic need, I would say, when we start to work with someone. The other thing is about, let's say, the status of the person. Is he a refugee, asylum seeker, forced migrant, exiled? So these have different statuses administratively and also psychologically. So how the people perceive themselves in the society where they are living. In camp or in urban contexts, also this is something that we need to distinguish. And most importantly, for almost all of them, there's an implicit trauma. Even if it's not visible, there will always be some trauma. So we need to be aware of this. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, I think there's so many points there that could be unpacked, both that legal status to then even you said status around confidence, psychological status to then different kind of traumas or personal histories. Emmanuel.
All right, so I can start by saying still new to the skills required to online learning, especially in an academic setting. They need the study skills, like the digital literacy skills. Few are struggling with digital literacy. That's why they're not prone to applying for digital work. So it's just a gap in terms of the skills needed to succeed in the digital workspace. And one thing is, some of the camps have these or the encampment policies where the refugees are not allowed to move to work. So you find that many of the refugees resort to agribusiness and entrepreneurship. So if you got an idea or a support system for those two contexts, I mean, you find most of them are either involved in agribusiness or in entrepreneurship.
Can you repeat, sorry, Emmanuel, just the last point?
Yeah, based on the needs assessment that we have done, I'm actually also based in the refugee camp, a refugee myself. And based on the needs assessment that we have done, you find that many of the refugees, because of the encampment policies, not being allowed to move, not being allowed to work in the host country, they're prone to be involved in agribusiness or entrepreneurship.
Okay. And involved in entrepreneurship or I apologize, I'm not here.
Agribusiness?
Agribusiness. Okay.
Agribusiness.
Great. No, this is, and I like that you specifically talked about the need to do an assessment as well, because I think that's something that we'll need to consider for this next piece, I think. Let's take maybe five more minutes, and I apologize, Lana, I really appreciate you hopping in with the piece on the chat, because since I'm sharing my screen, I actually can't access what you guys chat. So I appreciate your flexibility and coming in on that piece. And so I can't quite see the order of the hands as well. But
Yeah, I'll go ahead. So let's have Sana and then Lorraine.
Great.
Yeah, I think I would just say like very busy schedules, if it wasn't already mentioned, and also differing levels of internet access and access to electricity and technology to be able to access mentorship opportunities. And if not explained or given, like if that context isn't given to the mentor, they might get really frustrated at the fact that they, have these logistical challenges. So I would say, yeah, like different logistical challenges, busy schedules, and access to support to the technology.
Yeah.
Lorraine?
Thanks. So when I think about this, I think of our learner persona, who is our typical learner on a normal program. And because the way we work with organizations like React, work with Refugees and other partners, our learners are going through a digital skills training program. So they are gaining the skills to be digital workers. And the way the program works is it's ideally meant to go alongside an internship. So they are working, as Naja said, the internship is very important. So whilst they have their mentor, they should be doing an internship in parallel. So for us, when I think about our learner persona, someone who's had a digital skills training program, who has been through our workshops, so they understand these skills from a theoretical and some practical way, but now they're actually using these skills in real practice. So when we design our program, we think about this context of the learner having had these experiences. And of course, with all the challenges with everyone said, but really equip the skills to take advantage of what we're trying to support them with.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So that's what we're focusing on there is the fact that now through going through a program like Namal, for example, there are things that you've put in place to kind of make certain aspects of the profile uniform in terms of responding to certain of these, things that are maybe not uniform to go in. Yeah, no, that's really fantastic.
Yeah. Skills, technical and soft skills. Yeah,
absolutely. I on my end, I see John and then Jado, but again, I don't see the full picture of everyone. Does that sound like a good order?
Okay, thanks, Ravenna. I just wanted to add there are caps, there are restrictions on the amounts of income that somebody living in a refugee camp can earn that make it very prohibitive for companies to hire them, or visa requirements. And these are things we can't solve today, obviously. But I know lots of companies, corporates that would love to hire more people in refugee camps, but restrictions keep them from actually accomplishing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
One last point on this is regarding local opportunities for employment. Refugee camps are often located in high unemployment regions to begin with. And so they're competing for local population who already don't have enough jobs. It just makes it even more difficult.
That's a very good point.
Shadow?
Yeah, thinking about who is a refugee or displaced learner. I think to the question itself is, first of all, the person will have the status as a refugee or a displaced person as only a status, but also looking at in terms of the skills and needed things for him or her to succeed. Most of the refugees have a skill gap, mostly in a different setting. People would be like, oh, you don't know how to use Microsoft Word. No way, everyone knows that. But it's not the case. There are some really simple things which we undermine, but other people, young refugees, have a gap into that. And another thing is you find people, most of them graduates from universities or high school studies, but still have that gap, that kind of skills needed to succeed to the world. And the last point, which is really a big deal, is access to the tools, because most of the people, not many people have access to computers. Not many people have access to smartphones sometimes, good internet. So it's really challenging to young refugees. Yeah.
Okay. So the piece, I just want to make sure I understood, Jado, in terms of what you were saying about the education piece. You were saying that regardless of the education level, that most have the skill set to succeed. Are you referring to these pieces around innovation and resilience that we were talking about earlier?
Yeah, sure. Maybe to make it clear, you find someone who graduated from a university, but who is really, really shy or can't be in front of an employer and then say, hey, you need to hire me. This is why you need me in your team. So it's a skill gap that you find in many people regardless, but also it's a particular case on refugees from my experience.
Yeah, okay, that's fantastic. Thank you for that feedback. Does anyone have anything else to share before we go to the next discussion? And then after this discussion, we're going to do some breakout time where we're going to be really getting into developing things. So I hope you're not getting too frustrated. We're just trying to kind of set the tone before we get into the actual activity.
I think I saw here from Ataf.
Yeah.
I tried actually to use the function of raising hand. It doesn't work, but nevertheless, I agree with what colleagues have mentioned. I would add to that as well, that in some instances, the certificates gained by refugee before displacement are not recognized or accredited basically in the country where they are displaced. It's either not recognized, or in some other cases, they cannot get proof about their certification or level or education before their displacement or refugee seeking. So that's a kind of a challenge for them. It's a challenge as well for them to be integrated within the education system, higher education system, with different credentials than they used to be in their country, is a kind of a challenge for them to bridge the gap and to continue their education.
Yeah.
And I'll just I'll just build on that both recognition and then connection to professional networks, which I think is also an endorsement. It's a endorsement recognition, of that kind of social capital. And that's where I see the power of these mentorship programs is plugging into new kinds of professional networks and social capital.
Right. Absolutely. Can we go to the next discussion topic then? Fantastic. Okay. So now moving from this, who's a refugee displaced learner, we're going into focusing on what does a refugee or displaced learner need from a mentorship or advising program. So a couple questions to kind of get this started, which we sort of started touching base on because there's just so much expertise coming from all of you in this virtual room. These questions on when do they need to meet based on this really busy schedule or not? What format or mode should the program take? Should it be online? Should it be in person? How full is their schedule? Is this factor? What ages or times in their lives would the mentorship program be beneficial? And obviously there can be multiple answers to this, but just kind of to get us start thinking about this collectively. So do we want to start about, and if you have any other questions to add to this or that you would like to respond to, please feel free. This is just kind of to get the ball rolling. Do you all want to start on maybe when should the mentorship or advising programs meet? Or do we want it found could just be flexible as well?
Ask a clarifying question on when. Is it when in the arc of their education journey or life? Or are we talking like a certain date or time? So I'd be curious about that, just
fantastic.
Because for example, in Namal and React, we kind of onboard learners, get them kind of settled to online learning. And then, but before their internship programs, we introduce the mentor relationship. But we're often debating, should we start at the very beginning? Should we start it later? So be curious about that question.
What I was anticipating, and again, this is just an idea to kind of set a canvas for you all to kind of paint upon, but what ages or times in their life was more, the idea would be to capture kind of, are we talking about prior to an internship, for example, are we talking about at the end of their studies? Are we talking about, once they have small children to combat isolation, when they're transitioning to a new country? For me, that would be that question. And then when do they need to meet is more in terms of just the logistical. Does it have to be in the mornings because in the evenings it's dangerous in maybe in a refugee camp situation? Does it need to be on the weekends because the weeks are too full? It was more to kind of talk about the date and time kind of piece. So, but based on kind of what everyone's unique experiences are. Emmanuel?
Okay, thank you. So I'll just talk from my experience working at the gym.
Emmanuel, are you still there?
So
Emmanuel, are you still there?
He's dropped out.
Okay, I think hopefully he'll log back in. I saw on my end, I saw Sana and then Lorraine. Lana, is that what you're seeing too? Excellent. Okay, Sana?
Yeah, I think I really like the question at the top, like what does a refugee or displaced learner need from a program? And I feel like that's maybe just a bit different than like the post-its. But I'd love, like, maybe we can add a few post-its on that because it would be really great, right? Like, because and then it's kind of helpful to know, like, depending on the level, if they're in college or if they're in high school, or yeah, like that's their specific needs, or if they're searching for a job. So maybe we could highlight just the different points and then what they need from the mentorship program at each point.
Age, where they are in their education. Did you have any other, I know different factors, but just want to make sure I'm capturing the big ones, Sana?
Yeah, like I would say probably like college, recent graduates, and then like job seekers. Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Excellent. So for Abla,
and then Itaf.
In terms of the question, when do they need actually to meet? I think the starting point is to think that every refugee has the right and should have the opportunity to be in a kind of a learning program or a mentorship program, regardless when that in their life, whether they are young or early in the college or they have children or not. So any program actually should understand the different characteristics and the needs of these different groups rather than treating them as homogeneous, as you correctly reflected in your previous questions about different groups. So building a kind of what would be helpful is to build a persona for a different type of displaced or refugee, and from there a program can be designed basically to mostly meet their needs. When it comes to their schedule, possibly the best actually, or one of the good ways to deal with that is always to get to consult people actually part of the process. So people might consider like in the morning is good if mother has a kids and they go to school, morning is good, but for other people they might work in the morning. So a group who are enrolled in a program should be consulted to create a program and a schedule that suits them. And it should actually enjoy a kind of flexibility.
Right.
Okay. It doesn't work for some people in the morning, it could work in the evening. And so there is alternative for people to switch between.
Yeah, excellent point, Ataf, in terms of that consultant and really co-constructing with those involved. Lorraine.
So I think that we really have to expand our focus on when people need mentorship. Everyone needs a mentor. It's not just learners. And I feel we place too much emphasis on the young. And sometimes in a way, sometimes mentorship is good for the young, but sometimes it's wasted on the young because they don't know how to take advantage of it. So we need to teach them how to take advantage of mentors. But I really feel that everyone throughout their careers, so our alumni who graduated, who have jobs, in a way, they're the ones who benefit perhaps more than people just starting off their jobs, because they're at a stage where they know what they want and they know, and they just need someone to support them. I have mentors, and it's really a very important part of their lives. And this leads on to how full are people's schedules. I have to say, time management is one of my pet peeves. I have 2 children on my own, run a social enterprise, do consultancy, and I can still manage my time to have things. Your schedule is never too full to spend time on your personal development. So someone saying, I don't have time, my schedule is too full, you don't have the right priorities and you're not managing your own time. And this is one thing we need to teach our mentees, how to prioritize their professional development and how to manage their time.
And I think what you're powerfully speaking to is like that, both of a setting of expectations, but also the value of the mentorship relationship and how it's going to enable the other things that are in your day or in your goals. Excellent. Sonia.
Yeah, I think my question is related to the format or mode that the program should take. So given that displaced learners might face difficulties in having access to internet, having a proper connection while joining the program and the projects within the program, maybe these mentorship programs should have both synchronous and asynchronous parts, so that if you can't attend the synchronous mentorship programs, then you have the possibility to go over asynchronous material and get in touch with what is happening in the program. And then as a follow-up question, I am wondering to what extent can the mentorship and advising programs help the people who don't even have access to proper internet? For example, if there is any way we can contribute to giving them these resources so that we can ease the access to the program.
I just want to piggyback on that really fast, because that for me pulls back to what Jado was saying, and with the last even with the first question on the expectations, where he was saying, how can we bring the programs to the most marginalized rather than expecting them to come to us? I don't know that I have the answers, but I'm here, hoping to kind of work through these questions with all of you. But I wanted to create that connection. But I agree. So how can we support folks who can be in isolated communities and who don't even have access to internet or computers? And if anyone has any feedback on that, please feel free. Otherwise, we're going to definitely get into that a little more with the next part as well.
Anaris?
Yes, I was thinking of the question: what age or times in their lives to get these mentorship programs? So I think the programs can be divided into small units maybe, or terms, so that the students, even at the high school, the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, do need the communication skills and some other skills needed to even improve their personality. So we can train them or give them these skills or improve these skills at early age. Then we can continue with more advanced skills when they enter the higher education program.
Absolutely. That's fantastic.
Toph, final thought?
Oh, sorry, if it's me, actually, that was an old hand.
Lower down, there we go.
Okay, well, great. Lana, do you think that we should go into the breakout rooms then? Great.
Yeah, just give me a moment.
So what we're going to do, and pardon, Lana, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I'll just be on the back end setting those up as you speak.
Thank goodness, because I would not know how to do it. So I'm going to, while you all are in your breakout rooms, I'm going to be working on kind of organizing these fantastic post-it notes that we have in all directions so that we can revisit it at the end of the session. But right now, what we're going to do is we're going to do a small group activity where we're asking you all to design your dream mentorship program for refugee and displaced learners and create a press release. So that may sound daunting, but the idea is just really to push you to have the creative juices going. So we're going to create small breakout rooms. Lana, were you thinking of about five people per group? Is that what you were thinking? Okay, great. So we're going to do about 5 participants. Lana is going to do it randomly and automatically. So you're going to wake up and find yourself in a magical breakout room, if I understand correctly. What we're going to ask you to do, so I'm gonna, if you want to take a second to kind of, take a screenshot or jot this down. For this activity, we're going to ask each of you to design your dream mentorship program, create a press release. So what we're asking you to do is identify the actors with whom you'd partner, and also feel free to identify actors that don't exist. So if you say, we would need someone who is providing computers in this specific community, feel free to identify that, because maybe someone else in the group can point you in the right direction of that program that you didn't necessarily know about. Identify the actors or the needs that you would have. Imagine a program structure. So think about things like format, schedule, curriculum. Obviously, you're not going to develop the entire curriculum, but think about the sort of topics you would want to focus on. And then prepare a press release on a Word or open office doc. So when the 5 of you are together, if you could just nominate someone to kind of be the note taker who's going to open a document that they can share with you all through the screen share function. And you guys can kind of build that out together. The idea is that you're going to take 25 minutes to work on this. And when you come back, everyone's going to present their program and try to get the other participants excited about the solution that they're proposing. Okay, does anyone have any questions before you all go into your small groups? Okay, I'm going to take your silence as unbridled enthusiasm and that everyone's just ready to go. Lana, can you put people into their groups then? Great.
All set.
And so then. Should we cut the recording while it's just the two of us? Or
Yeah.
do you?
Hold on,
All right. Great. So I think we have everyone back then. Did you guys have a nice conversations?
Sure.
Jadot, would your group like to go first? You made the mistake of speaking before everyone else, so I'm doing your trick.
Definitely. We can go first. No worries.
Great.
Yeah. All right. We can check our. Okay. Well, I have the note ready now. Well, so I would love to start on the second point, if you allow it, on the program structure, and John and Amy will maybe tackle the first point, is the program structure. Well, we talked about different things, but we also thought in mind the people we are working with. I said it's better to understand the mentee before even we jump into the program in a way which is, I would say, on a personal level. Let's say I'm a refugee. I'm living in a refugee camp in Rwanda, and Alnajes is a refugee, is living in a refugee camp somewhere else. It's a different context, but we have the same status. So how can you as a mentor understand me, or how can we design a program to understand me as a mentee before we even jump into the program? And another thing is to have mentors who understand the situation in a way that they need to have a training before. Hey, you're going to work with this guy or these people, so this might be the case, and how can you behave in that kind of situation? And another thing which I think is also important, just a point which came in mind right now, is we have mentees who've been in the program or mentors who are successful in the field. How can we then bring that experience back to the real scenario, or mentees or new mentees joining the program? So that program will be like, you along the people who've been in the program come back and then say, hey, this is how things went. And the last point is that you can design a program giving the skill, the soft skills, allowing myself to be able to communicate, access people, access resources, and then be able to portray what I want. But again, you need to think about the program which fits to everyone. We have different schedules, different agendas, if I would say, so we can adapt the program which is flexible to everyone, from mentees and mentors. Let me stop from there. I think I'm reading on minutes.
That was fantastic. Do you have do you have kind of a press release or anything that you wanted to share, or did you guys kind of use that time more just sort of brainstorm and go through the different questions?
I think we just brainstormed on different questions. Yeah.
No worries. That's fine. Thank you so much.
Ravenna, Andrew also has some things about the actors involved that he wanted to share.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, this is Andrew from Uganda. Now, that who are the key actors that we are looking as partners who are going to support the mentees, and then the mentors for the mentees are going for job interviews or internships. So we looked at the local partners who, for in the long run, they will be the one connecting the refugees for employment. And of course, also the local actors like humanitarian organizations will be accepting refugees to come and learn some viable skills, soft skills, critical thinking skills, the core skills, life skills, and also including business partners who will be on rolling basis, accepting internships on rolling basis, accepting employment for qualified refugees. So we are looking at the local actors as business partners and humanitarian organizations. who may have a large-scale intervention, maybe during earthquake or during a drought or during landslide, that they may call in very many or large-scale numbers of refugees to support. And in that case, they can give them opportunity to work, get more skills how to intervene. And of course, the network of those organizations and mentees and mentors form a cultivating environment to coexist, where they learn from each other, ask questions, the one-on-one questions to do well, either in an interview or in a job placement. So briefly, that's what we discussed as a team, and thanks to my other team members. I think John Bowling and Jado and, oh, I forgot the other name. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great. Wonderful, Andrew. Thank you. Would another group like to give their feedback or share their press release if they developed one? Yeah, Sonia?
I just want to ask first if there is anyone else from my group who wants to share. And if not, if you guys can share on the way as we go.
I might have to head out in a couple minutes for iftar.
Sure.
Yes.
Then I'm just going to share my screen because we have like a piece of press release, like right here. So we were thinking that if sky was the limit, then we would gather all these organizations, NGOs, UNHCR, government entities, and companies together to have these monthly or annual checkups where everyone reflects on the impact and on what can be done to improve the mentorship programs. So the headline of our program was Refugees Serving and Uplifting Organizations Build a Community of Support to Take Refugees to a Higher Level of Success, Security, and Recognition. So some of our key features, we were thinking about remote and in-person programming. Broad areas of support will be education, livelihoods, connections, and logistical challenges, because we talked about it previously. The ultimate goal is to build refugee human capital and offer holistic support. And overall, this is like a sharing economy where everyone collaborates to share resources so that everyone could be on the same page in a way, even though this can be very diverse because we're talking about connecting all displaced learners and refugees with all the companies and stakeholders in the world in trying to like find the gaps and fill them. Yeah. While this can be very diverse and not like very, yeah. Anyways, if there is anyone who wants to share, to add to our ideas. Group number 3.
That was great.
That's wonderful. That is so fantastic. And Sana, or if anyone else is breaking for iftar, just you know, have a saha tortum. Thank you for joining us. And that was wonderful, Sonia. Merci. Thank you a lot. Pardon, I'm in France. Would anyone else would the last group like to present before we bring it back together to kind of touch on the last pieces?
I think I'm the only one left from my group now.
Okay, well, thank you, Ravenna.
I mean, we spent a lot of time talking about, the sort of, conceptually as opposed to the practicalities, and we sort of spoke about the need to make sure that mentors understand. Someone said that, and so really thoroughly prepare the mentors for the issues which they could be facing. So we sort of spoke about what the idea was, having resources on the ground, and we sort of had a discussion about what does on the ground mean. And for me, we're a virtual organization, so for us, on the ground means the space we're occupying now, and not physically on the ground, because we have learners distributed globally. So for us, there is no, on the ground. But one thing that we did notice is, just as MIT are trying to, to create, if we have learners who are in a particular location, how can we get them together to support them? So that's what on the ground for us looks like, learners coming together who live in the same location, but not in a way that's sort of controlled by us necessarily. And again, we sort of spoke about the idea of a blended model versus a virtual model, and we spoke about the merits of both. With a blended model, the learners have that physical contact with the mentors, the physical access, but on the flip side of that, there is the virtual space, which for me, this is my bias. This is where I think the magic happens, where you meet people who you would never meet in real life, and who are so different from you. This is where the magic happens for both the mentor and the mentee, meeting someone who is not of their context. So that's why, so we sort of spoke about the value of both, and, and we did see the value of doing both. We did have a quick discussion about curriculum ideas available in, the language, whether the mentor should have an understanding of the mentee language, because sometimes in a second language, it's hard to have those nuances. Also, we said it should be based around skills, and Emmanuel brought up the idea that SNHU graduates have good soft skills, but they don't necessarily have the technical marketable skills, which is interesting for me, because often the soft skills are the ones which are harder to teach, hard to learn. So that's a really good tribute to SNHU, that they're doing really well in the soft skills development, but recognizing that the soft skills are really important, but that the hard technical skills are what you sell to companies, because that's what, companies, they really prioritize the soft skills, but you have to be able to do something. So again, a mentorship program based around individuals who have marketable skills, both technical and soft skills, not soft, human skills.
Right.
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's what we spoke about.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Lorraine. Thank you, Lorraine. Thank you, everyone. This was just really a fantastic discussion. I'm going to share my screen one last time to kind of show sort of the things that we looked at together, and how Lana and I we tried to take all your ideas and create some groups and sort of some key themes. I think for the time, obviously this is such a massive topic, and we're not going to be able to touch on everything in the short time that we had together, but the idea was really to have a space for everyone to kind of be able to share and interact, and hopefully hear some ideas that they hadn't necessarily thought about, and identify some folks who can help them move forward their mission. So in terms of what we kind of heard for the expectations, the main themes were trying to connect with other actors who can help improve and grow existing programs, brainstorming on how to support the most marginalized learners, discussing how to better reflect community and learner needs in program design, and considering ways to increase engagement from different stakeholders. I just wanted to touch base. I know that we did not dive as deeply as we could have into all of these topics, but are there any lingering questions around these expectations that haven't been met, or that you'd like us to touch on in the last few minutes that we have together? All right, again, taking the silence as an opportunity, as an invitation to move forward, and we're going to have like a last question kind of that connects back to that as well. You see kind of our different organizational styles between Lana and myself. I had the more absurd clusters of colors, and then here is much easier to read. So here we were looking at this question of who is a refugee displaced learner, and we heard that honestly, instead of creating a profile, super interesting, what you all came up with were kind of the key questions that we had to keep in mind, the key focuses and questions as we were developing programs to support them, meaning understand their status and level of access, recognize strengths, prior skills and knowledges, understanding learning needs, understanding the work and career status and their access, and recognition by academia, industry, and professional networks of all these skills and the backgrounds of the individuals. So we're going to share all this with you all afterwards, but just really great to hear, with all the actors involved in this conversation coming from such different backgrounds and different relationships to this discussion, that those are the sort of key points that came up. And then this last piece that we looked at was, what does a refugee, displaced learner, or displaced learner need from a mentorship or advising program? And we kind of found a lot of really good feedback that I think you all incorporated into the programs that you were sort of imagining or developing in your last breakout room discussion. But a couple of these questions and a couple of these ideas for, Anaj just had this fantastic idea about a program could be created in smaller units with specific topics based on time of life that would respond to this first question on what ages or times in their lives, but it also responds to this question around format. So just a couple kind of key pieces that we looked at all together. Just in the last 5 minutes that we have together, based on the conversations that we all had in our all together in the large group, and then in our breakout time, I wanted to know if anyone has an idea of how they're going to use today's discussion and connections to move forward, either in changing something within their program or improving something within their program, or potentially connecting with another program that they met in today's discussion. Does anyone have any kind of next steps that come to mind?
I'll start, because this has been really great for me. We have a program now, but what I've learned here, and especially in the breakout room, was that it's not just throwing mentorship material at a refugee. You have to be sure that they are ready to actually absorb that we come from different difficult situations, and understanding their environment and how best to support them is paramount in starting off a relationship in the right way. And I've also connected with so many new potential partners so that we can all work together in this process. So this has been a very valuable, the first two sessions today were just so incredibly valuable to me.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I find myself really thinking a lot about, what does mentorship mean really foundationally, as a kind of a relationship in a moment or pivot of change or time of change for both the mentee and the mentor. And so how to better understand both the mentees and the mentors and how they're coming to these relationships, and like John said, how to support. So I find myself excited to dive into our materials as well.
Yeah, and thank you. This is a really good session earlier and today. And for me, what I find, what really struck me and what I will sort of hold quite closely is that the power that this can have, the impact this can have on on the learner, the influence, and not just their what they do as a work, but sort of how they then support other people. So so Jean, I'm really inspired that you learned from the program, and then you're taking this and helping others as a result of what you learned. So for me, when I think of the mentorship program, I think, okay, I'm helping, on this React program, 135, but that 135 will be multiplied, because these will then take something forward to make an impact on others. So it's a huge multiplier effect. And for me, that's what I'm going to really hold and try to remember.
Yeah, really. I would say thank you so much for the conversation. And my point here is a challenge to everyone, which we are talking about mentorships and all the programs running in the space. But the real point is, where are we leading the mentees? What is the end goal? The landing for a job. That's it. If I go into GMI mentorship program and then I land into a job within 6 months or a year, that's a wow to GMI and also to myself. But then how can we design and center that program to deliver that outcome? Sorry, that I will share a personal experience. I was looking for a job in last year, and then I had to to look for different stuff. It was so like, it's really a challenging time for me. But I said, okay, let me at least have something small instead of waiting for me to get a big job or a high-paying job for me to survive. But I said, let me take this kind of internship. But the interesting part of the story is that I was working on an internship, a 9-to-5 job as usual, was paying me really less money, but enough for me to survive. And the funny part is that I had a smaller gig, which I was working on after work. I only used like 3 hours a day or 2 hours a day. But the thing is, the real story is I was earning almost twice as much as I'm earning at the internship. And this thing is the challenge, or my challenge is actually related to the work Lorraine Chalice is doing. How can we train the refugees get into the mentorship program, be ready to meet a person, express themselves, and be able to sell that kind of skill? But what kind of skill does that refugee have to sell to that particular person? So it will be, I'm really good at writing. So I have the writing skill, so I want to sell the writing skill to Ravenna or to John, then be able to get the money from that. So the challenge is, how can we have that program delivering that outcome, but also making sure that young guy have that kind of skill he or she's going to sell to the potential employer person. Yep.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Jado, and thank you everyone for such a fantastic and intentional participation. It was really such an honor to have such a diversity of perspectives and such open and willing participation. It shows how much everyone is invested in making this a community, a collective research of the best solutions and how we can work together. So thank you so much for your time and for your engagement. And I'm going to turn it over to Lana to let you all know in terms of next steps and the rest of the summit.
Yeah, and thank you, Ravenna, for facilitating this excellent session, and for everyone's really thoughtful participation. Jado, your final question, I think, is a great charge to leave us with. So on next steps, we'll share the notes and the recording from this session so you can revisit. Invite you to join us for upcoming Migration Summit sessions. The rest of this week, we're continuing to dive into post-secondary higher ed, then into workforce development, getting into digital skills, all of that. So much still here to learn and discuss together. And we'd love to really think about how this group can be really kind of a collaborative learning community as we each develop our respective mentorship programs. Where are those places that we can learn from one another, pool resources as we've talked. So Ravenna and I will be meeting to kind of debrief on all that's been shared here and really think through some of our next steps. So we'll certainly be in touch. So thank you all. Have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you. Thanks for organizing this.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you all. And I would love to be in touch, John and Ravenna. It's really wonderful to meet you. And thank you so much.
Likewise.
Thanks, Sonia, for being here. Thank you, everyone. It's wonderful to meet everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Take care, all.
Bye.
Bye.